Mason Reed never imagined that finding a designer purse in a snowdrift would destroy everything he thought he knew about second chances. What started as a simple act of kindness during Chicago's worst blizzard in decades became the most dangerous risk he'd ever taken, not with his life, but with his carefully guarded heart. Because the woman who answered that door wasn't just beautiful and successful. She was broken in ways that matched his own scars perfectly. And when two people who've lost everything finally find something worth keeping, the real storm is just beginning. If you want to see how far a single decision can change two lives forever, stay until the end. And let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The windshield wipers were losing the fight. Mason Reed gripped the steering wheel tighter, squinting through the wall of white that had swallowed Lakeshore Drive whole. The weather report had called it a significant winter event, which was Chicago's polite way of saying the city was about to get its ass kicked by Mother Nature. Again. It was 12:47 a.m., and Mason was pretty sure he was the only idiot still on the road. His ancient Ford Explorer groaned as it pushed through another drift, the engine making that rattling sound it had been making for 3 months now. The sound that said, "Get me fixed or I'm dying on you," in the middle of the expressway. But mechanics cost money, and money was something Mason currently had in the same abundance as free time and decent sleep, which was to say none at all. The double shift at the warehouse had run long. A semi had jackknifed on I-90, backing up deliveries for hours, and Mason's supervisor had that special talent for making requests sound optional while making it crystal clear they absolutely were not. So while the snow started coming down and every sane person headed home, Mason had stayed, loading boxes until his shoulders burned and his lower back felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to it. He was 32 years old and felt 50. His phone buzzed in the cup holder. Mason didn't need to look to know it was his sister, Lauren. "I'm fine," he muttered to the empty car. "Still alive, still driving, still—" The Explorer hit a patch of ice and fishtailed. Mason's heart jumped into his throat as the rear end swung left, then right. He steered into the skid. Thank you, driver's ed from a million years ago. And somehow, miraculously, the tires found purchase again. "Still not dead," he finished, exhaling hard. His hands were shaking. He flexed his fingers, one at a time, trying to get the adrenaline to settle. The heating system wheezed out air that was barely warm enough to qualify as room temperature. Mason's breath still fogged in front of his face. Just get home. That's all. Just get home. Except home wasn't really home tonight. Home was his sister's apartment in Pilsen, where his 7-year-old daughter Chloe was currently asleep in a borrowed bed, safe and warm and completely oblivious to the fact that her father was playing Russian roulette with black ice and zero visibility. Lauren had insisted. "You're not bringing her back to that freezer you call a house in this weather, Mason. No argument. She stays here." Lauren was good at the no argument thing, probably because she'd had to be, stepping in after Emma died, and Mason had basically forgotten how to be a functional human being for the better part of a year. His sister had been the one who made sure Chloe ate breakfast and got to school and didn't fall completely through the cracks, while Mason learned how to be a single father who had never wanted to be single in the first place. That was 4 years ago. 4 years that felt like both a lifetime and also just yesterday, depending on what kind of day he was having. Tonight was a yesterday kind of night. Mason turned off Lake Shore onto the smaller streets that would take him back to his neighborhood. The snow was deeper here, untouched, except for a few sets of tire tracks already being erased by the continuing storm. The streetlights cast everything in an orange-yellow glow that made the whole scene look surreal, like driving through a snow globe someone wouldn't stop shaking. His neighborhood, Ravenswood technically, though he lived on the edge where it bled into Lincoln Square, was the kind of place that was gentrifying in slow motion. New townhouses sprouting up next to old bungalows, craft breweries opening while corner stores closed, people like Mason hanging on by their fingernails, living next to people who thought $70 for brunch was reasonable. He pulled onto his street, Levitt, quiet and tree-lined in the summer, currently buried under what had to be 8 inches of snow with more coming down every second. Mason's house was a small 2-bedroom he'd bought back when he and Emma had thought they were starting there forever, before cancer had shown up and rewritten the whole damn story. The Explorer's headlights swept across his driveway, then across the house next door. That's when Mason saw it. A purse, expensive-looking, dark leather, sitting in the snow like someone had just dropped it and kept walking. Except nobody was walking in this. Nobody was doing anything in this except Mason, apparently, who had a gift for being in the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. He should keep driving, pull into his driveway, get inside, collapse on the couch, and deal with whatever this was in the morning. That's what a smart person would do. Mason put the Explorer in park. "You're an idiot," he told himself. He pulled his coat tighter and stepped out into the storm. The wind hit him immediately, sharp and bitter, carrying snow that stung his face like tiny needles. The purse was about 15 feet away, half buried already. Mason trudged through the drift, his work boots sinking deep with each step. Up close, the purse was definitely expensive. Designer label he didn't recognize, but the kind of leather that probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment. Inside, because yes, he looked, because what if there was ID, he found a wallet, keys, phone, the usual stuff. The driver's license had a name, Victoria Hayes. Victoria Hayes, the woman who'd bought the townhouse next door 3 months ago. Mason had seen her exactly twice. Once during the move-in, directing professional movers with the kind of calm authority that suggested she did not personally carry boxes. And once, about a week later, getting into a black sedan that probably cost more than Mason made in a year. She looked like money. The kind of effortless, understated money that didn't need to announce itself. Good clothes that fit perfectly. Hair always done. The general air of someone whose life was aggressively together, which made finding her purse in a snowbank even more confusing. Mason looked at the townhouse. Lights on inside. Someone was home. He should just leave the purse on her doorstep, ring the bell, and go. Quick drop-off. Good deed done. Minimal human interaction required. But it was 12:30 in the morning, visibility was approximately 5 feet, and if he left it outside, the purse would be buried by morning. Plus, what if she needed her keys? Her phone? What if she'd been looking for this thing and panicking? "You're overthinking," Mason muttered. But he was already walking toward her front door, purse in hand, snow accumulating on his shoulders. The townhouse was one of the new builds, all modern lines and big windows, and that architect design look that screamed expensive. There was a small covered porch, at least, which gave Mason a brief respite from the wind. He brushed snow off his coat and rang the doorbell. Nothing happened. He waited. Counted to 30. Rang again. Still nothing. Mason was about to give up and just leave the purse when he heard footsteps inside. Then the deadbolt sliding. Then the door opened, and there she was. Victoria Hayes looked different than the 2 times he'd seen her. Her dark hair, usually styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore yoga pants and an oversized Northwestern sweatshirt that had seen better days. No makeup, bare feet, and an expression that suggested she was absolutely not expecting anyone to be on her porch at nearly 1 in the morning during a blizzard. "Hi," Mason said, because apparently his brain had decided that was an adequate opening. "I'm Mason, from next door. I found your purse." Victoria stared at him, then at the purse, then back at him. "You found my purse," she repeated slowly. "Yeah, it was in the snow. Outside." Mason held it out. "I figured you might need it." She took it, still looking confused. "I didn't even realize I'd lost it." "Well, you did. Lose it, I mean. It was pretty buried." "Smooth, Mason. Real smooth." Victoria opened the purse, checked inside, and some of the confusion cleared from her face. "My keys. I've been looking for these for 2 hours. I thought I'd left them at the office." They were definitely not at the office. Apparently not. She looked up at him again, and Mason noticed her eyes were this warm brown color that seemed at odds with the general Ice Queen vibe he'd assigned her in his head. "You went out in this to return a purse?" Mason shrugged. "Wasn't that far. It's a blizzard. It's Chicago. This is just aggressive flurries." The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Aggressive flurries. We'll call it a Category 3 snowstorm. Category 5 is when you can't see your own car in the driveway. And what category are we at now?" Mason pretended to consider this seriously. Solid 4.5. This time she actually did smile. Small, but real. Then the wind gusted hard enough to rattle the porch railing, and Victoria's expression shifted. "You should come inside." Mason blinked. "What?" "Come inside," she repeated. "I'm not sending you back out in that. At least wait until the wind dies down." "I'm parked right there." He gestured toward the Explorer, barely visible through the snow. Seriously, I'm fine. You drove here in that thing? Victoria looked genuinely concerned now. That's a death trap. Hey, that death trap has gotten me through 5 Chicago winters. Then you've used up all your luck. Come inside. It wasn't a request. It was said with the kind of easy authority that suggested Victoria Hayes was used to people doing what she told them to do. Mason should have argued, should have politely declined and gone home to his empty, cold house. Instead, he found himself saying, "Okay, just until it lets up a little." Victoria stepped back, holding the door open. Mason stomped the snow off his boots and walked into a house that was the exact opposite of his own. Everything was clean, like aggressively clean. Minimalist furniture that looked uncomfortable but probably cost a fortune. Hardwood floors that gleamed. A kitchen visible from the entrance with appliances that seemed more decorative than functional. The whole place had that unlived-in quality of a staged home, except someone actually lived here. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe Victoria Hayes just existed here, which wasn't quite the same thing. "I'll make coffee," Victoria said, already moving toward the kitchen. "You don't have to—" "I'm making it anyway. Decaf or regular?" "Regular, thanks." Mason stood awkwardly in the entryway, unsure what to do with himself. His coat was soaked. His boots were tracking melted snow onto her perfect floors. He probably looked like something that had crawled out of a particularly rough dumpster. "You can hang your coat there." Victoria gestured to a sleek coat rack near the door. "And don't worry about the floors. They're meant to get dirty." Meant to, maybe, but clearly not used to it. Mason hung up his coat and followed her into the kitchen. The space was spotless. Granite countertops without a single coffee ring or crumb. Stainless steel appliances that reflected the overhead lighting. A single coffee mug in the sink, the only evidence that anyone actually used this room. Victoria pulled out a fancy espresso machine that looked like it required an engineering degree to operate. She moved through the process with mechanical efficiency, grinding beans, tamping grounds, waiting for the machine to heat up. The whole thing had a practiced quality, like a ritual performed by muscle memory rather than conscious thought. "How long have you lived here?" Mason asked, just to fill the silence. 3 months? Almost 4. "You moved in September?" Late August, technically." She didn't look at him, focused on the espresso machine. "Closed on the house in June, but it took a while to... I had some things to sort out first." There was a weight to that last part. Some things to sort out. The kind of deliberately vague phrasing that meant don't ask follow-up questions. Mason didn't ask. The espresso machine hissed and gurgled. Victoria pulled 2 shots, added hot water from an electric kettle that had appeared from somewhere, and handed Mason a mug that was warm enough to burn his cold, numbed fingers. "Thanks," he said. "You're welcome." They stood there in her pristine kitchen, drinking coffee, while the storm continued its assault on the windows. The silence stretched out, not quite comfortable, but not entirely awkward either. Finally, Victoria said, "You have a daughter." Mason looked up, surprised. "How did you—" "I've seen her playing outside sometimes. She's 7? Just turned 7 in October. She's beautiful. She has your eyes." Mason felt something tight in his chest. "She has my eyes and her mom's everything else, which is good, because her mom was the pretty one." Was. The question hung there. Mason took a sip of coffee, buying time. "She died 4 years ago. Cancer." Victoria's expression didn't change exactly, but something shifted behind her eyes. "I'm sorry." "Yeah, me too." Another silence, this one heavier. "Is it just you and your daughter?" Victoria asked. "Mostly. My sister helps out a lot. Tonight, actually, Chloe's staying with her because of the storm. Didn't want to risk the drive back after work." Mason heard himself talking and couldn't quite stop. "I work at a shipping warehouse, UPS, night shifts usually, but they've got me on doubles this week because someone quit and they haven't hired a replacement yet. Typical corporate efficiency." "Typical," Victoria echoed, and there was something bitter in her voice. "You know about corporate efficiency." "You could say that." Mason waited, but she didn't elaborate. Just drank her coffee and stared out the window at the snow. "What about you?" he asked. "What do you do?" "I was a CEO." Was. Past tense. Of what? "A tech company. Software development, mostly. Enterprise Solutions. She said it flatly, like reciting someone else's resume. I started it when I was 24, built it from the ground up, sold it 6 months ago. Mason did the math. You're what, 30? 31 in February. So you built and sold a company before you're even 35? Is that impressive? She didn't sound like she thought it was. I mean, yeah, most people don't do that. Victoria made a non-committal sound. Most people don't burn out so completely they can't stand to look at their own office. There it was, the truth underneath the vague explanations and past tense job titles. That why you left? Mason asked. That's one reason. What are the others? She looked at him then, really looked at him, like she was trying to figure out if he actually wanted to know, or if he was just making conversation. Mason held her gaze, and something in his expression must have satisfied whatever test she was running. I spent 6 years building something I thought mattered, Victoria said. I worked 70-hour weeks. I missed holidays, birthdays, every normal thing people do. I told myself it was worth it because we were creating something valuable, something that would change how businesses operate. Did you? We made a lot of money. That's what mattered in the end. The acquisition offer was too good to refuse. Everyone told me to take it. Board members, investors, my attorney, even my... She stopped. Everyone said take the money. So I did. But you regret it. I regret that I don't regret it enough. I should feel something, right? This was my company. My entire adult life went into it, and when I signed the papers, all I felt was relieved that it was over. The espresso machine gurgled in the background. Outside, the wind howled. I don't think that's wrong, Mason said, being relieved. No? Something can matter and still be the right thing to walk away from. Victoria studied him over the rim of her coffee mug. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Mason thought about the last 4 years. The jobs he'd quit because they didn't pay enough, or the hours didn't work with Chloe's school schedule. The friends who'd drifted away because he couldn't do late nights or spontaneous plans. The version of himself he'd walked away from when Emma died, because that person didn't exist anymore. Yeah, he said. I guess I am. They were both quiet again. But this time the silence felt different, less like strangers making small talk, and more like two people who'd accidentally stumbled into an honest conversation at 1 a.m. during a blizzard. Victoria refilled both their mugs without asking. Do you miss it? Mason asked. The company? Sometimes. I miss feeling like I was good at something, like I had a purpose. She wrapped both hands around her mug. Now I just have money and no idea what to do with myself. Most people would call that a good problem to have. Most people haven't spent their entire 20s optimizing their life around a single goal and then suddenly achieved it with 15 years to spare. So do something else. Like what? I don't know. What do you actually like doing? Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, frowned. I'm not sure I know anymore. When you were a kid, what did you want to be? A veterinarian. So do that. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I'm 30 years old. I'm not going back to school for another decade to become a vet. Why not? Because that's ridiculous. Says who? Victoria didn't have an answer for that. She just shook her head, still frowning, like the idea of doing something purely because she wanted to was fundamentally foreign. Mason knew that feeling. He'd been living a version of it since Emma died. Wake up, go to work, take care of Chloe, collapse, repeat. Somewhere in there, he was supposed to want things again. Be a person with interests and hobbies and a future that extended beyond just surviving until tomorrow. He was working on it, slowly. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. Why did you really come over here? You could have left the purse on the porch. Mason considered lying, making up something about being a good neighbor or worried about the keys getting buried. But Victoria had been honest with him, and that seemed to require honesty in return. I don't know, he said. Honestly, it seemed like the right thing to do, and I'm tired of only doing the practical thing. What's the practical thing? Going home, not talking to people, not letting anyone close enough to actually see how much I'm barely keeping it together most days. Victoria's expression softened. You seem like you're keeping it together pretty well. That's because you're seeing me on a good day. This is a good day? You just worked a double shift and drove through a blizzard. Yeah, but Chloe's safe. I didn't die on the way home, and I'm drinking actually good coffee instead of the gas station sludge I usually have at this hour. So, Yeah. Good day? The corner of Victoria's mouth lifted. Your bar is very low. Survival-based optimism. It's a whole lifestyle. Sounds exhausting. It super is. They both smiled at that, small and a little sad, but real. The wind outside had finally started to let up. Mason could see his Explorer through the window now, completely buried except for the general outline. He should probably dig it out. Get home. Let Victoria get back to whatever she'd been doing before he showed up. But he didn't want to. And that was strange enough that Mason actually paused to examine the feeling. He didn't want to leave. Didn't want to go back to his empty house and cold rooms and the hollow quiet that filled every corner. He wanted to stay in this warm kitchen with this lonely woman who'd accidentally told him more about herself in 30 minutes than most people learned in a year. That should probably worry him, but mostly it just felt nice. I should let you get back to your night, Mason said, even though that was the exact opposite of what he wanted. Victoria hesitated. You could stay. What? Not like that, she added quickly. I just meant the storm's getting worse again. You saw the forecast, right? They're calling for another 6 inches overnight. I have a snowblower. I don't. And if you get stuck in your driveway, you're not digging yourself out until morning at the earliest. She set down her coffee mug. I have a guest room. You could stay there, get some actual sleep, and dig yourself out when it's light and the snow's stopped. It was a practical offer, reasonable even. But Mason could see the truth underneath it. Victoria didn't want to be alone any more than he did. I don't want to impose, he said. You're not. I'm offering. You don't even know me. You returned my purse in a blizzard and didn't steal anything. That's basically a character reference. Mason laughed despite himself. That's a very low bar for trustworthiness. Like you said, survival-based optimism. She was using his own words against him, and somehow that made the whole thing feel less strange. Less like accepting charity from a stranger, and more like two people making a practical decision that happened to benefit both of them. Okay, Mason heard himself say. Just for tonight. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Relief, maybe? Or gratitude? Or just the simple pleasure of not spending another night alone in a house that was beautiful and empty and nothing like a home. Just for tonight, she agreed. But even then, standing in her kitchen while the storm tried to bury the city, Mason suspected that wasn't entirely true. That somehow, without meaning to, they'd both just opened a door that was going to be very hard to close again. He just didn't know if that was a good thing or not. Victoria showed him to the guest room, which was exactly as pristine and impersonal as the rest of the house. Clean sheets that still had the fold lines from the package. Furniture that looked like it had been arranged by someone following an interior design Pinterest board. A bathroom attached with towels so white and fluffy they'd probably never been used. There's extra blankets in the closet if you get cold, Victoria said from the doorway. And help yourself to anything in the kitchen if you're hungry. Thanks. Really, this is... You didn't have to do this. I know, but I wanted to. She said it simply, like it was just a fact. And maybe it was. Good night, Mason. Good night. Victoria closed the door and Mason was alone in a room that was nicer than anywhere he'd slept in years. He sat on the edge of the bed, which was somehow both firm and soft in that way expensive mattresses managed, and pulled out his phone. 3 texts from Lauren. Lauren, you home yet? Lauren, Mason seriously texts me back. Lauren, if you're dead, I'm going to kill you. Mason typed back. Not dead. Staying at the neighbor's place. Long story. Tell Chloe I love her. The response came immediately. Lauren, the neighbor? The hot CEO neighbor? Mason stared at his phone. How do you know she's a CEO? Lauren, I Googled her when she moved in. Victoria Hayes, sold some software company for stupid money, and you're staying at her house? It's not like that. Storm got bad. She has a guest room. Lauren, uh-huh. Sure, just the guest room. Go to sleep, Lauren. Lauren, you go to sleep in your neighbor's guest room. Can't wait to hear this story. Mason turned off his phone and lay back on the bed. The ceiling was smooth and white and unmarked by the water stains that decorated his own bedroom. Everything smelled clean, new, unused. He should feel out of place here, like he didn't belong. But instead, Lying in the dark, listening to the storm outside and the quiet sounds of someone else moving around in the house, Mason felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt like maybe, just maybe, there was still room in his life for something other than survival. Even if that something was just drinking coffee at 1 in the morning with a stranger who turned out to be less of a stranger than he'd thought. Mason closed his eyes and, for the first time in months, fell asleep without having to fight for it. In the other room, Victoria sat on her couch with her own coffee, staring at the fireplace she never used because it seemed wasteful to burn a fire just for herself. She should go to bed. It was late, and she didn't have anything tomorrow, or the day after that, or the day after that. That was the problem, wasn't it? All this time and money and freedom, and absolutely no idea what to do with any of it. But tonight, for a few hours at least, she'd talked to someone. Really talked. Not networking or negotiating or performing the careful dance of professional relationships. Just talking, honestly, with someone who seemed to understand what it was like to feel completely lost while appearing to have everything together. Victoria pulled the Northwestern sweatshirt tighter around herself. It had been David's back when they were in college together. Back before he'd decided that her success made him feel small and her ambition made her impossible to love. Back before he'd systematically dismantled her ability to trust anyone who said they cared about her. That was 2 years ago. She'd thrown herself into the company after that because work was safe, quantifiable. You put in effort, you got results. No one's feelings got hurt. And you didn't wake up feeling like maybe you were fundamentally unlovable. Except now she didn't have the company anymore. And the feelings she'd been avoiding were still there, waiting. Victoria looked toward the guest room where Mason Reed, single father, warehouse worker, apparently decent enough person to return lost purses during blizzards, was sleeping in her house. She didn't know why she'd invited him in, didn't know why she'd told him things she hadn't told anyone, didn't know why his presence in her empty house felt more comforting than unsettling. But she did know one thing. She didn't want him to leave in the morning, and that terrified her more than she wanted to admit. Mason woke to the smell of something burning. Not fire burning. More like toast that went too far burning. He lay there for a moment, disoriented, staring at a ceiling that wasn't his, wrapped in sheets that were softer than anything he owned. The events of the previous night filtered back slowly. The storm, the purse, Victoria Hayes standing in her doorway, looking nothing like the polished stranger he'd seen from a distance. The guest room. Right. Mason checked his phone. 7:23 a.m. 4 texts from Lauren, all variations on "I need details," and one from his supervisor saying the warehouse was closed due to snow accumulation. First time in 3 years they'd actually shut down. The storm must have been worse than he thought. He got up and looked out the window. The world outside was buried. His Explorer was completely invisible under what had to be at least 14 inches of fresh snow. The street looked like something from a postcard, all pristine white and untouched, beautiful in the way that disasters can be when you're safe inside looking out. Another crash from the kitchen, followed by a very creative string of cursing. Mason pulled on his jeans and ventured out into the hallway. The townhouse looked different in daylight, still minimalist and expensive, but the morning sun streaming through those big windows made it feel less like a showroom and more like a place where people might actually live. He found Victoria in the kitchen, glaring at a pan on the stove like it had personally offended her. There was smoke coming from said pan. The smoke detector was beeping, and Victoria was holding a spatula like a weapon. "Everything okay?" Mason asked. Victoria spun around, startled. Her hair was still in that messy ponytail from last night, and she'd added flannel pajama pants to the Northwestern sweatshirt. No makeup, no polish, just a woman who looked genuinely frustrated with breakfast. "I'm trying to make pancakes," she said. "I can see that." "They're not cooperating." Mason looked at the pan. What had probably started as pancake batter was now a charred mass that resembled something excavated from Pompeii. "How long have those been cooking?" "I don't know. 10 minutes?" "Victoria, pancakes take like 2 minutes per side." "Well, the internet said medium heat for 10 to 12 minutes. "That's for the whole batch, not individual pancakes." She stared at him. "That's a stupid way to write a recipe." Mason couldn't help it. He laughed. Actually laughed, the kind that came from his chest and felt good. Victoria's expression shifted from frustrated to embarrassed to reluctantly amused. "Don't laugh at me," she said, but there was no heat in it. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the pancakes. The pancakes are a disaster. Yeah, they really are. Mason crossed to the stove and turned off the burner. The smoke detector was still going. He grabbed a kitchen towel and waved it under the alarm until the beeping finally stopped. When's the last time you actually cooked something? Victoria was quiet for a moment. Define cooking. Making food. With heat and ingredients. Does a microwave count? Not really. No. She sighed. Then probably 6 months, maybe longer. I used to just eat at the office or order in. For 6 years? Don't judge me. I'm not judging. I'm impressed you're still alive. Victoria threw the spatula into the sink with more force than necessary. I wanted to do something nice. You stayed over, and I thought, I don't know what I thought, that I could make breakfast like a normal person. There was something vulnerable in her voice that made Mason's chest tight. This woman who'd built and sold a company before 30, who lived in a house that probably cost more than Mason would make in a lifetime, couldn't figure out pancakes and was genuinely upset about it. Hey, Mason said. It's fine, really. The thought counts. The thought doesn't feed people. No, but I'm pretty good at pancakes. So how about you sit down and I'll handle breakfast? Victoria looked at him like he'd just offered her something far more valuable than breakfast. You don't have to do that. I know, but I'm hungry, and I'm guessing you are too, and between the two of us, I'm the one who won't accidentally create a biohazard in your kitchen. It wasn't that bad. Mason gestured to the pan. Victoria, I think those pancakes are sentient now. She looked at the charred mass and made a face. Okay, fine, they're bad. Catastrophically bad. You can stop now. Historically bad, like archaeologists will study these. Mason. Future generations will tell stories about the great pancake disaster of... Victoria threw a dish towel at him. Mason caught it, grinning, and Victoria was trying not to smile but failing completely. Just make the damn pancakes, she said. Yes, ma'am. Mason got to work. He'd been making breakfast for Chloe for 4 years. Pancakes, eggs, toast, the whole rotation of things a 7-year-old would actually eat. It was muscle memory at this point. He found a clean pan, adjusted the heat, and started fresh while Victoria sat at the kitchen island watching him like he was performing surgery. You're good at this, she said. It's just pancakes. I literally just proved it's not just anything. Fair point. Mason poured batter into the pan, watching it spread and bubble. Chloe likes them shaped like animals sometimes. I got pretty good at making Mickey Mouse. That's sweet. That's survival. You try telling a 6-year-old she has to eat regular circles for breakfast. Victoria smiled. She sounds like she keeps you on your toes. Every single day. Mason flipped the pancake. Perfect golden brown. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, even when she's driving me completely insane. Do you see yourself in her, or is she more like her mom? The question was gentle, careful. Mason appreciated that. Both, he said. She's stubborn like me. Gets fixated on things and won't let go. But she's got Emma's kindness. Her ability to just see people, really see them. Emma could walk into a room and immediately know who needed help or who was having a bad day. Chloe's like that. She notices things. Sounds like her dad's not bad at noticing things either. Mason glanced at her. What do you mean? You noticed I lost my purse in a blizzard. Most people would have kept driving. Most people are smarter than me. I don't think that's true. There was something in the way she said it that made Mason pause. He plated the first pancake and started another. The kitchen filled with the smell of cooking batter and coffee. Victoria had figured out the espresso machine again, thankfully without incident. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. Last night you said you're tired of only doing the practical thing. What did you mean? Mason focused on the pan, watching bubbles form in the batter. After Emma died, I went on autopilot. Had to, really. There was Chloe and the bills, and just getting through each day without completely falling apart. I stopped thinking about what I wanted and just focused on what needed to be done. That sounds practical. It was. It is. But somewhere in there, I forgot that I'm supposed to be a person and not just a father and a paycheck. I forgot that I'm allowed to want things that aren't directly related to keeping my kid alive and housed. Like what? I don't know. That's the problem. He flipped the pancake. I used to want stuff. I wanted to finish my degree. I dropped out when Emma got sick. I wanted to learn guitar. Stupid stuff, probably, but it was mine. Now I can't remember the last time I wanted something just for me. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I don't think that's stupid. No? No, I think it's honest. Most people won't admit they've lost themselves. Mason plated the second pancake and started a third. What about you? What do you want? Besides the ability to make pancakes? Besides that, Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, that same gesture from last night. Mason was starting to recognize it as a nervous tell. I want to not feel like I wasted my 20s chasing something that didn't matter. Building a company matters. Does it? We made software that helped corporations optimize their workflow processes. We made rich people richer. That was it. That was the thing I poured 6 years of my life into. You employed people, gave them jobs, salaries, benefits. That matters. I guess. She didn't sound convinced. I just thought there'd be more, you know. I thought success would feel different, better. Instead, I sold the company, made more money than I'll ever spend, and moved into this house that's supposed to be my dream home. And all I feel is empty. Mason slid the third pancake onto the growing stack and turned off the burner. He brought the plate to the island along with 2 forks and sat down across from Victoria. Want to know what I think? He said. Sure. I think you're grieving. Victoria looked up sharply. What? Not for a person. For the life you thought you'd have. The version of yourself you thought you'd be. That's grief too. She stared at him, and Mason could see he'd hit something true. Her eyes got bright for a second before she blinked it away. I didn't expect warehouse workers to be so philosophical, she said, trying for light and not quite making it. We have a lot of time to think while lifting boxes. Apparently. They ate in silence for a while. The pancakes were good. Not perfect, but solid. Definitely better than the carbon discs Victoria had created. Outside, the snow had finally stopped, leaving everything buried and blindingly white. These are really good, Victoria said. Thanks. Secret ingredient is not burning them. She smiled. I'll remember that. Please do, for the safety of your kitchen. My kitchen's been perfectly safe for 3 months. Because you haven't been using it. Exactly. A foolproof system. Mason laughed. It kept happening around her, that easy laughter. Like his body remembered how to do it, even though his brain had forgotten. They finished breakfast, and Mason insisted on doing the dishes over Victoria's protests. It gave him something to do with his hands, and besides, she'd given him a place to sleep and tried to make him breakfast. The least he could do was clean up. Victoria stood nearby, leaning against the counter, and Mason was acutely aware of her presence in a way that felt both comfortable and slightly dangerous, like standing too close to something warm. So what's your plan? She asked. For today. Dig out the Explorer, assuming I can find it under all that snow. Call my sister, get the 3rd degree about staying here. Probably get Chloe back this afternoon if the roads are clear enough. That sounds exhausting. Welcome to single parenthood. Do you ever get a break? Not really, but I'm good at functioning on no sleep and sustained panic, so it works out. Victoria frowned. That's not sustainable. It's been 4 years. Mason? What? He rinsed a plate and set it in the dish rack. I'm serious. It's fine. This is just what life looks like now. It doesn't have to. He turned to look at her. What do you mean? I mean you're allowed to ask for help, to not do everything alone. I have help. Lauren's great with Chloe. I'm not talking about childcare. I'm talking about you. When's the last time you did something that wasn't work or parenting? Mason thought about it. Really thought about it. I took Chloe to the park 2 weeks ago. That's parenting. We had fun. I'm sure you did, but when's the last time you did something just for you? The answer was never. Or at least, not since Emma died. Everything was calibrated around Chloe's needs, the bills, the job. There wasn't room for just Mason, and he'd made peace with that. Except standing in Victoria's kitchen, being asked the question directly, he realized maybe he hadn't made peace with it. Maybe he'd just gotten used to it, which wasn't the same thing at all. I don't know, he admitted. Victoria's expression softened. That's what I thought. It's not that simple. I know it's not, but you can't pour from an empty cup. Did you just quote a motivational poster at me? Yes, and I stand by it. Mason shook his head, but he was smiling. You're something else, you know that? I've been told that. Usually not as a compliment. It's a compliment. They looked at each other across the kitchen, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition. The shared acknowledgement that they were both running on empty and had been for longer than they wanted to admit. Mason's phone buzzed. He dried his hands and checked it. Lauren. Chloe wants to know when you're coming to get her. Also, I want details about your sleepover immediately. He typed back. Give me a few hours. Need to dig out the car. And it wasn't a sleepover. Lauren. You slept. You were over. Math checks out. Everything okay? Victoria asked. My sister's being annoying. Older or younger? Younger by 2 years. Acts like she's the responsible one. Is she? Unfortunately, yes. Victoria smiled. I always wanted a sibling. Only child? Yeah. My parents tried for more, but she stopped. It didn't work out. There was weight in that sentence, but before Mason could ask, Victoria changed the subject. You said your daughter's name is Chloe? Yeah, Chloe Marie. The Marie's after Emma's mom. That's beautiful. Does she know about her mom? Some. I've told her the basics, that her mom was sick, that we loved each other, that Emma loved her more than anything. Mason leaned against the counter. She asks questions sometimes, usually at bedtime when I'm exhausted and not ready for deep conversations. What kind of questions? Kid stuff. If her mom would be proud of her. If she's watching from heaven, though I don't really know how to answer that one because I'm not sure what I believe anymore. If I miss her. Do you? The question was quiet. Careful. Every day, Mason said. But it's different now. The first year was drowning, just trying to breathe and keep Chloe from seeing how badly I was falling apart. The second year was anger, at the cancer, at the unfairness, at Emma for leaving even though I knew that was irrational. Third year was when I finally started feeling functional again. And now I miss her, but it doesn't destroy me anymore. I can remember the good parts without getting crushed by the bad. I can imagine a future that doesn't include her without feeling guilty about it. Victoria nodded slowly. That sounds like healing. Maybe. Or maybe it's just time doing what time does. Those might be the same thing. Mason considered that. Yeah, maybe they are. Outside, a snowplow finally rumbled down the street, its blade scraping loudly against the pavement. The sound of the city waking up, digging out, getting back to normal. Except Mason didn't feel ready for normal yet. He felt like he'd stumbled into something unexpected and wasn't quite sure what to do with it. I should probably start digging out my car, he said, not moving. Probably, Victoria agreed, also not moving. They stood there in her kitchen, the morning light making everything feel suspended and unreal. Like they'd stepped outside normal time somehow and weren't quite ready to step back in. Can I tell you something? Victoria said. Of course. I haven't talked to anyone like this in years. Really talked, I mean. Not networking or small talk or business negotiations, just conversation. Me neither. Why not? Mason thought about it. After Emma died, people didn't know what to say to me. They'd either avoid me completely or give me these sad looks like I was broken. Eventually, I just stopped trying. Easier to keep people at a distance. And now? Now I'm realizing distance is lonely. Victoria's eyes were bright again, that almost crying thing that she kept blinking away. Yeah, it really is. They were standing closer than Mason had realized, close enough that he could see the faint freckles across her nose that makeup usually covered. Close enough to notice that her eyes weren't just brown, they had these little flecks of gold that caught the light. Mason stepped back, not because he wanted to, but because this was happening too fast, and he didn't trust his own judgment anymore. I should... he started. Yeah, Victoria said quickly. The car. You should dig it out. Right. Neither of them moved. Victoria, Mason said. Yeah? Thank you. For last night, for this morning, for... He gestured vaguely at the space between them. All of it. You're welcome. She walked him to the door and gave him a real winter coat from her closet. Men's, expensive, probably left over from someone else's life. It fit reasonably well and was warmer than anything Mason owned. Keep it, Victoria said when he tried to give it back. I don't need it. You sure? Very sure. Mason pulled on his boots and stepped out into the cold. The snow came up past his knees. His Explorer was still invisible. This was going to take hours. Mason? Victoria called from the doorway. He turned. If you want, if you need anything, coffee or whatever, you know where I am. It was a small offer, casually delivered, but Mason heard what she wasn't saying, that she didn't want this to be the end, that maybe she was as lonely as he was and equally bad at admitting it. Same to you, he said. If you want to try making pancakes again, I'm available for supervision. Victoria smiled, real and warm and just a little sad. I might take you up on that. Please do. I'm invested in your culinary journey now. It's going to be a long journey. That's fine. I've got time. It wasn't true. Mason barely had time to breathe most days. But standing in Victoria's doorway after a night that had somehow shifted something fundamental in his carefully structured life, he wanted it to be true. He wanted time. Victoria waved as he trudged through the snow toward his buried car. Mason waved back and tried to ignore the feeling that he was walking away from something important. The next 3 hours were brutal. Even with a shovel borrowed from his own garage, digging out the Explorer was like excavating a woolly mammoth from permafrost. By the time Mason finished, his back was screaming, his hands were numb despite gloves, and he was pretty sure he'd sweated through every layer he was wearing. But the car was free, and when he turned the key, the engine actually started. Small miracles. Mason drove to his sister's apartment carefully, the road still treacherous despite the plows. Lauren lived in a third-floor walk-up in Pilsen, the kind of place that was affordable because the landlord didn't believe in fixing anything that wasn't actively on fire. Chloe met him at the door, launching herself at his legs with the force of a small cannonball. Daddy! Hey, Bug. Mason scooped her up, his back protesting immediately. Miss me? You were gone forever. It was one night. That's forever. 7-year-old logic, hard to argue with. Lauren appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, wearing her favorite Chicago Marathon 2024 shirt and an expression that said, Mason was about to get interrogated. So, she said. So, Mason repeated. You stayed at Victoria Hayes's house. I stayed in her guest room during a blizzard. Very different thing. Uh-huh. Lauren's smile was dangerous. Tell me everything. There's nothing to tell. Mason, you spent the night at a beautiful, rich, single woman's house, and you're telling me nothing happened? Nothing happened. We talked. I slept in the guest room. She tried to make breakfast and nearly burned down her kitchen. The end. She made you breakfast? Tried to. Key word being tried. Chloe was watching this exchange like a tennis match. Who's Victoria? Nobody, Mason said. Our new neighbor? Lauren said at the same time. Chloe's eyes went wide. The pretty lady in the big house? Have you been spying on the neighbors? Mason asked his daughter. Aunt Lauren said she looked like a movie star. Mason turned to his sister. Really? Lauren shrugged, unapologetic. She does. Don't change the subject. What did you talk about? Life, work, the usual. For how long? I don't know. A couple hours? And then she just offered you the guest room. The storm was getting worse. It made sense. Mason. Lauren put a hand on his shoulder. When's the last time you talked to a woman who wasn't me or a grocery store cashier for more than 5 minutes? Mason opened his mouth, closed it. That's not the point. That's exactly the point. You liked her. It's not, we just talked, Lauren. Right. And you're planning to talk to her again? Mason thought about Victoria's smile in the kitchen, the way she'd looked when she offered him coffee or whatever, the coat she'd given him that still smelled faintly like expensive cologne. Maybe, he admitted. Lauren's expression softened from teasing to something gentler. Good. You deserve that. Deserve what? Connection. Friendship. Someone to talk to who isn't your sister or your 7-year-old. I have friends. Name 3 people you've had an actual conversation with in the last month. Mason tried, came up empty. That's what I thought, Lauren said. Look, I'm not saying you need to marry the woman. I'm just saying maybe it's okay to have someone in your life who isn't directly related to parenting or working. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't listen. Chloe tugged on Mason's shirt. Can we go home now? Yeah, Bug. Let's go home. They said goodbye to Lauren with promises to text when they got back safely. The drive was slow, careful, both of them quiet. Chloe eventually dozed off in her booster seat, and Mason found himself glancing at Victoria's townhouse as he pulled into his driveway. The lights were on. He could see her moving around inside, just a shadow behind those big windows. He wondered if she was lonely, if she was thinking about their conversation the way he was, if she'd meant it when she said he could come over for coffee. Daddy? Chloe's sleepy voice from the back seat. Yeah, Bug? Are you okay? I'm fine. Why? You look sad. Mason met his daughter's eyes in the rearview mirror. 7 years old, and she could read him like a book. Emma's talent, passed down. I'm not sad, he said, just thinking. About what? About a woman he barely knew who'd somehow become important in the space of one night. About how lonely he'd been without realizing it. About whether it was possible to want something for himself without feeling guilty. Nothing important, he lied. Chloe accepted this with a shrug and went back to looking out the window. Mason carried her inside, got her settled with a snack and a movie, and tried to pretend everything was normal. But it wasn't normal. Something had shifted, and Mason wasn't sure if he should be excited or terrified. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hi, it's Victoria. Got your number from the neighborhood directory. Hope that's not creepy. Just wanted to make sure you made it home okay. Mason stared at the text for a long moment, then typed back. Not creepy. Made it fine. How's the kitchen? Still standing? The response came quickly. Barely. I tried to make eggs for lunch. Do not ask how it went. That bad? There may have been a small fire. Victoria, I put it out. With the fire extinguisher like a responsible adult. You need supervision. Are you volunteering? Mason's thumb hovered over the keyboard. This was it. The moment where he either kept his distance or took a step toward something unknown. He thought about Lauren's words, about connection and friendship and allowing himself to want things. Yeah, I am. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Tomorrow? I promise not to burn anything. I'll believe it when I see it. Is that a yes? Mason looked at his daughter, safe and happy on the couch. Looked at his house, small and messy and full of life. Looked at his phone and the conversation with a woman who was somehow both a stranger and not. Yeah, it's a yes. He didn't know what he was agreeing to, didn't know where this was going or if it was going anywhere at all. But for the first time in 4 years, Mason Reed felt like maybe the future held more than just survival. And that was enough to take the next step. Tomorrow turned into the next day. And then the day after that, and somehow 3 weeks had passed since the blizzard, and Mason couldn't remember the last time he'd gone more than 2 days without seeing Victoria. It started small. Coffee in the mornings before work when Mason had the early shift. Victoria teaching Chloe how to use her fancy espresso machine, which resulted in foam everywhere and his daughter laughing so hard she nearly fell off the kitchen stool. Dinners that were supposed to be quick but stretched into hours because they kept talking and losing track of time. Mason told himself it was just neighborly, that's all. 2 people who lived next door to each other being friendly. Except neighbors didn't usually know that Victoria had nightmares about board meetings where everyone spoke a language she didn't understand. Neighbors didn't text at 2 in the morning because they couldn't sleep and knew the other person was probably awake too. Neighbors didn't feel this inevitable, like gravity pulling them into the same orbit whether they wanted it or not. And Mason definitely wanted it, which was the problem. It was a Tuesday in mid-February when everything shifted again. Mason was walking home from the bus stop. The Explorer had finally died for good last week, currently sitting in a mechanic's lot awaiting repairs he couldn't afford yet, when he saw Chloe on Victoria's front porch. His daughter was crying, which sent Mason's heart straight into his throat. He ran the last 50 feet. Chloe, what's wrong? What happened? Chloe looked up, her face blotchy and streaked with tears. I lost my backpack. Mason's panic downshifted into confusion. You lost your backpack? At school. I left it in the gym, and when I went back it was gone, and Mrs. Peterson said to check lost and found tomorrow, but my homework's in there and my library book, and... She dissolved into fresh sobs. Victoria appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain. She came over because you weren't home yet. I hope that's okay. I tried calling, but my phone died. Mason pulled it from his pocket. Dead. Of course. It's fine, thank you. He knelt down to Chloe's level. Hey, Bug, look at me. Chloe hiccuped and met his eyes. It's going to be okay, Mason said. We'll call the school, talk to Mrs. Peterson, figure it out. Your backpack's probably in the office right now. But what if someone stole it? Nobody's stealing a second-grade backpack, trust me. But my homework, We'll explain what happened. Your teacher will understand. Chloe's lower lip trembled. I'm supposed to be responsible. The words hit Mason harder than they should have. He recognized them. They were his words, things he'd said to her about being a big girl and taking care of her things. Except now he was hearing them come back at him wrapped in anxiety and self-blame, and he hated it. You are responsible, Mason said firmly. Responsible people make mistakes sometimes. That's allowed. You don't make mistakes. Mason almost laughed. I make mistakes all the time, Chloe. Like what? Like thinking I could do this alone. Like forgetting that I'm allowed to need help. Like being so scared of getting hurt again that I almost missed this. Like forgetting to check if my phone's charged, he said instead. Come on. Let's go inside, call the school, and then figure out dinner. Chloe wiped her eyes and nodded. Mason stood and looked at Victoria, who was watching them with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, he said again, for being here. Of course. Victoria hesitated. I made too much pasta earlier. If you guys want to come over for dinner, I know it's last minute, but you made pasta? Mason couldn't help the surprise in his voice. I followed a recipe, mostly. There were only 2 minor incidents. Define minor. The smoke detector only went off once. Victoria. I'm getting better, and it's actually edible this time. Probably. Chloe tugged on Mason's hand. Can we, Daddy? Please? Mason looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Victoria standing in her doorway trying so hard to appear casual while offering something that felt bigger than dinner. Yeah, he said, we'd love to. Victoria's smile was worth every complicated feeling currently tangling itself in Mason's chest. The pasta was actually good. More than good. It was legitimately impressive for someone who'd been afraid of her own stove a month ago. Victoria had made carbonara, and while the sauce was a little thin and the bacon slightly overcooked, it tasted like a real meal cooked by a real person. This is amazing, Mason said. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm impressed. Liar. Impressed liar. Chloe giggled through a mouthful of pasta. They were sitting at Victoria's dining table, which Mason was pretty sure had never actually been used for dining before tonight. There were placemats that still had the fold creases and cloth napkins that were definitely new. Victoria had tried. She'd really tried. And something about that effort made Mason's throat tight. Miss Victoria? Chloe said. Yeah, sweetheart? How come you don't have any pictures? Mason looked around and realized Chloe was right. The townhouse was still that same minimalist showcase it had been the first night. No photos on the walls, no personal touches, nothing that indicated who actually lived here. Victoria set down her fork carefully. I don't have many pictures to put up. Why not? Chloe, Mason said quietly. That's personal. It's okay. Victoria met Chloe's curious gaze. I moved around a lot growing up. My parents traveled for work, and we never stayed in one place very long. I guess I never got in the habit of decorating. Where are your parents now? They died when I was 23. The words were delivered matter-of-factly, but Mason heard the pain underneath. Chloe's eyes went wide. Both of them? Car accident. It was quick. Like my mom? Victoria's expression flickered. Your mom died? She had cancer, Chloe said, with the blunt honesty of someone who'd grown up with death as a fact, rather than an abstraction. But Daddy says she's not hurting anymore. I'm sure she's not, Victoria said softly. She looked at Mason. You never told me how I knew she was gone, but ovarian cancer, Mason said. Diagnosed when Chloe was 2. We had a year and a half. He stopped. Looked at his daughter. It was hard. Chloe reached over and patted his hand. The gesture was so Emma-like that Mason had to look away. I don't remember her very much, Chloe said. Just little bits, like she smelled like vanilla and she sang off-key. She really did, Mason confirmed. Couldn't carry a tune to save her life. Daddy says I have her smile. I bet you do. Victoria smiled at Chloe, and there was something achingly gentle in it. I bet it's beautiful. They finished dinner, and Chloe helped clear the table, chattering about her class's upcoming field trip to the planetarium. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions about constellations and whether Chloe thought Pluto should still be a planet. It's too small, Chloe declared. You have to be big to be a planet. That seems unfair, Victoria said. Size isn't everything. That's what Daddy says about our house. Mason laughed. Our house is objectively tiny, Bug. But it's cozy. Very diplomatic. After the dishes were done, Mason insisted, Victoria supervised. Chloe discovered that Victoria had a piano in the living room. Mason hadn't even noticed it before, tucked against the far wall, like something that existed purely for decoration. Do you play? Chloe asked, already climbing onto the bench. I used to, when I was your age. Can you teach me? Victoria looked uncertain. I'm pretty rusty. Please? It was impossible to say no to Chloe when she used that voice. Victoria sat down next to her on the bench and showed her middle C. Soon they were picking out Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, one note at a time, Chloe's tongue sticking out in concentration. Mason watched from the doorway, something warm and terrifying spreading through his chest. This scene, his daughter, and this woman who was somehow becoming important, sharing a piano bench in a house that was starting to feel less empty, it looked too much like something he'd thought he'd lost forever. It looked like family. His phone buzzed. He'd plugged it in earlier, and now Lauren's name flashed across the screen. Lauren. Haven't heard from you in 3 days. You alive? Mason. Barely. Work's been crazy. Lauren. Or you've been spending all your time with a certain neighbor. Mason glanced at Victoria and Chloe, still absorbed in the piano. We're just friends. Lauren. Sure. And I'm the Queen of England. How's Her Majesty doing, by the way? Mason. You're annoying. Lauren. You're deflecting. Bring her to Sunday dinner. Mason. What? Lauren. This Sunday. Bring Victoria. I want to meet the woman who's got my brother actually smiling again. Mason. I'm not bringing her to Sunday dinner. Lauren. Why not? Afraid I'll embarrass you? Mason. Terrified. Also, it's too soon. Lauren. It's been a month. That's like a year in widower time. Mason. That's not how time works. Lauren. Sunday, 6 p.m. Don't make me call her myself. Mason. You don't have her number. Lauren. I will find it. I have my ways. Mason sighed and pocketed his phone. The piano music had stopped. Victoria was looking at him with a question in her eyes. Everything okay? She asked. My sister wants you to come to Sunday dinner. Victoria blinked. What? She's insistent and slightly terrifying when she wants to be. You don't have to. I mean, if that's too weird. It's definitely weird, Mason said honestly. But if you want to come, you're invited. Chloe bounced on the piano bench. Say yes. Aunt Lauren makes the best lasagna. Victoria looked between them, and Mason could see her weighing it. This was a line they hadn't crossed yet. Meeting family was different than coffee and dinners and late-night conversations. Meeting family implied something more serious, more real. Okay, Victoria said finally. I'd like that. Sunday dinner at Lauren's apartment was exactly as chaotic as Mason expected. His sister had gone all out. Lasagna, garlic bread, salad, wine that probably cost more than she should have spent. The apartment was too small for the four of them, plus Lauren's boyfriend Marcus, who was a paramedic and had the kind of calm demeanor that came from dealing with emergencies for a living. Victoria arrived exactly on time, wearing dark jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Mason's entire wardrobe, but looked casual enough not to scream money. She brought wine and flowers, which made Lauren shoot Mason a meaningful look that he pretended not to see. You must be Victoria, Lauren said, pulling her into a hug before Victoria could even set down the wine. I've heard so much about you. All lies, Mason said. All true, Lauren corrected. She beamed at Victoria. Come in, come in. I hope you're hungry. Dinner was loud and warm and exactly the kind of family chaos that Mason had grown up with. Lauren interrogated Victoria with the subtlety of a detective, asking about her company, her house, whether she liked Chicago winters. Marcus tried to rein her in and mostly failed. Chloe told everyone about learning piano and how Victoria was teaching her chopsticks. It's really just hitting the same keys over and over, Victoria said. I wouldn't call it teaching. She's being modest, Chloe declared. She's a good teacher. When did you become her lawyer? Mason asked. Since she lets me use the fancy coffee machine. Bribery. Nice. Victoria was handling the chaos better than Mason expected. She answered Lauren's questions honestly, but didn't overshare. She complimented the lasagna and meant it. She laughed at Marcus's terrible jokes and helped Chloe cut her garlic bread when the knife wouldn't cooperate. She fit. That was the terrifying part. She fit into the scene like she'd always been there. After dinner, while Mason and Marcus did dishes and Chloe watched a movie in the living room, Lauren cornered Victoria in the kitchen. So, Lauren said, what are your intentions with my brother? Victoria nearly dropped the wine glass she was drying. I'm sorry? Kidding, mostly, Lauren grinned. But seriously, you like him. We're friends. Friends who have dinner together 4 times a week? Is there a limit on friend dinners I'm not aware of? Fair point. Lauren leaned against the counter. Look, I'm going to be blunt because that's who I am. Mason's been through hell. He spent 4 years just surviving, and I watched him turn into this shell of who he used to be. And then you showed up, and suddenly he's laughing again. He's texting me random stuff during the day. He's actually talking about the future instead of just tomorrow. Victoria set down the wine glass. We're not. I know. You're taking it slow. That's smart. But I need you to know something. Lauren's expression turned serious. If you're not in this for real, if this is just a fun distraction or whatever, walk away now because he's going to fall for you if he hasn't already, and I can't watch him get destroyed again. I would never. Victoria stopped, started over. I'm not trying to hurt him. I didn't think you were, but intention isn't the same as impact. They looked at each other across the kitchen, and Victoria felt the weight of what Lauren was really asking. Are you serious about this? Are you ready for what it means to be with someone who has a kid and a dead wife and trauma he's still working through? Are you capable of not running when it gets hard? I care about him, Victoria said quietly. A lot, more than I expected to. But I have my own stuff, my own damage. I'm not good at this, at letting people in, at trusting that it won't all fall apart. Lauren's expression softened. Nobody's good at it. We're all just figuring it out as we go. You make it look easy. That's because you're seeing the highlight reel. You're not seeing the fights or the doubts or the nights when I'm convinced I'm doing everything wrong. She smiled. Love isn't easy, but it's worth it. That's the secret nobody tells you. Before Victoria could respond, Chloe appeared in the doorway. Daddy says we have to go home soon because I have school tomorrow. He's right, Lauren said. But you're coming back, right, Victoria? Victoria looked at Chloe, then at Mason in the living room collecting their coats, then at Lauren, who was watching her with an expression that was half challenge, half hope. Yeah, Victoria said. I'd like that. The walk back to Mason's car was quiet. He'd managed to borrow Lauren's Honda for the night since the Explorer was still in the shop. Chloe dozed off in the back seat within 5 minutes, worn out from dinner and playing with Marcus's paramedic radio. Your sister's intense, Victoria said. That's one word for it. I liked her. Yeah? Yeah. She cares about you, a lot. Mason glanced at her. She give you the shovel talk? Is that what that was? Probably. She's protective. She has reason to be. They drove in silence for a few blocks. The city slid past the windows, all lights and movement and the constant hum of traffic. Mason's hands were tight on the steering wheel. What she said about intentions or whatever, you don't have to worry about that, Victoria said. I'm not going anywhere. Mason pulled up to a red light and looked at her, really looked at her. You sure about that? No, I'm terrified actually, but I'm still here. The light turned green. Mason pressed the gas, and Victoria watched the city blur past, thinking about what she'd just promised. She wasn't lying. She was terrified. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to protect herself, to maintain distance, to not let this man and his daughter become so important that losing them would break her. Because that's what happened when you let people in. They left. They died. Or they chose someone else. Or they decided you weren't worth the effort. But Mason wasn't like that. She was learning that slowly, in all the small ways he showed up. The way he listened when she talked about missing her parents. The way he didn't judge her for being 30 and not knowing how to cook. The way he looked at her like she was worth figuring out, complications and all. And Chloe. That little girl with Emma's smile and Mason's stubbornness had somehow crawled into Victoria's heart without permission. Teaching her piano, helping with homework, listening to stories about school, Victoria had spent her entire adult life avoiding exactly this kind of attachment. Kids meant permanence, commitment, the kind of future planning that terrified her. But Chloe didn't feel like obligation. She felt like joy. March came with unpredictable weather and the slow crawl toward spring. Mason's work schedule shifted again. More doubles, less sleep, the usual grind. Victoria started volunteering at Chloe's school library on Thursdays, which somehow turned into her being recruited for the spring book fair committee. "I don't know anything about book fairs," she'd protested to Mason. "Neither does anyone else on the committee. That's the secret." That's not reassuring. Welcome to elementary school parent politics. It's cutthroat. He wasn't kidding. The first committee meeting was 2 hours of debate about whether to organize books by genre or age level, with surprisingly strong feelings on both sides. Victoria sat there thinking about board meetings she'd run where millions of dollars were at stake, and somehow this felt more stressful. But there was something grounding about it too. Something real. These weren't shareholders or investors, or people who wanted something from her. They were just parents trying to make their kids' school a little better. She found herself looking forward to Thursdays. One night in late March, Mason showed up at Victoria's door at 11 p.m. looking exhausted and frustrated. "Sorry," he said immediately. "I know it's late. Can I come in?" "Of course." Victoria stepped back, and Mason walked past her into the living room where he collapsed on the couch and put his head in his hands. Victoria sat down next to him, close but not touching. "What happened?" "The Explorer's totaled. Mechanic called today. Frame damage, transmission shot, the whole thing. Would cost more to fix than the car's worth." "I'm sorry. I don't have money for another car right now. Been borrowing Lauren's, taking the bus when I can, but the schedule doesn't work with Chloe's school and my shifts and..." He stopped, breathed. "Sorry, I'm tired." "You don't have to apologize for being tired. I feel like I'm constantly behind, like I'm running as fast as I can and still losing ground." Victoria put her hand on his knee without thinking about it. Mason covered it with his own, and they sat there in the quiet of her living room while the weight of everything pressed down. "You're doing everything right," Victoria said. "Doesn't feel like it. You're raising a kid alone, working doubles, showing up for everything. You're allowed to be tired. When does it get easier?" "I don't know. But you're not doing it alone anymore." Mason looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I can help. With Chloe, with rides, whatever you need. Victoria, I want to. Let me help." "You already do so much. So let me do more." She squeezed his hand. "You've been handling everything by yourself for 4 years. You're allowed to accept help." Mason was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Can I tell you something?" "Always." "I'm scared." "Of what?" "This, you. How much I'm starting to need you." He looked at their joined hands. "Emma died, and it destroyed me. Took me years to even function again. And now you're here, and you're everything I didn't know I was looking for. And that terrifies me because what if I lose you too?" Victoria's throat was tight. "You won't lose me." "You can't promise that." "No, I can't. But I can promise I'm not going anywhere by choice." Mason pulled her closer, and Victoria went, tucking herself against his side. His arm came around her shoulders, solid and warm. They sat like that for a while, not talking, just existing in the same space. "Thank you," Mason said finally, "for being here." "Where else would I be?" "I don't know, somewhere more exciting than my constant crisis management." Victoria smiled against his shoulder. "This is exactly where I want to be." And she meant it. Somewhere in the last 2 months, Victoria's carefully constructed life of isolation and emotional distance had been completely dismantled by a man who returned lost purses in blizzards, and a little girl who asked too many questions and made her laugh. She'd spent 6 years building a company. But this, sitting on a couch with Mason, making pancakes with Chloe, showing up for book fairs and piano lessons, this felt more like building a life. By April, they'd fallen into a rhythm that felt comfortable and terrifying in equal measure. Victoria picked Chloe up from school twice a week when Mason had late shifts. Mason fixed the leaking faucet in Victoria's guest bathroom and taught her how to actually use her dishwasher. They had dinner together more nights than not, sometimes at her place, sometimes at his, always with Chloe's running commentary and questions about everything. "Miss Victoria, why don't you have a boyfriend?" Chloe asked one night over takeout pizza. Mason choked on his drink. "Chloe, that's rude." "Why is it rude? I'm just asking." Victoria smiled. "It's okay. I don't have a boyfriend because I haven't found the right person yet." "What makes someone the right person?" "That's a good question." Victoria thought about it. "Someone who makes you feel like yourself, who you can talk to about anything, who makes you want to be better but likes you exactly as you are." Chloe considered this seriously. "Like you and Daddy?" The question hung in the air. Mason and Victoria looked at each other across the table, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe, or recognition that they'd been dancing around this for months and everyone could see it except them. Or maybe they could see it too. Maybe that was the whole problem. "Yeah, Bug," Mason said quietly, "like me and Victoria." Later, after Chloe was in bed and Mason was getting ready to leave, Victoria walked him to the door. "Sorry about the interrogation," Mason said. "She's at that age where she doesn't have a filter." "I didn't mind." "No?" "No." Victoria leaned against the doorframe. "She's right, you know, about us." Mason's expression shifted. "Victoria, I'm not asking for anything. I wanted you to know that I see it too, whatever this is. What if I'm not ready? Then we wait. I'm not going anywhere." Mason stepped closer, close enough that Victoria could feel the heat of him. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "How can you be sure?" "I can't, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway." They stood there in her doorway, inches apart, and Victoria thought he might kiss her, wanted him to kiss her. But Mason just touched her cheek gently and smiled. "Good night, Victoria." "Good night." She watched him walk across the lawn to his house, and when he turned back at his door, she was still standing there. He waved. She waved back. And Victoria went inside and sat on her couch in the dark, thinking about how she'd promised herself she'd never do this again. Never let someone close enough to hurt her. Never risk her carefully protected heart on something as unpredictable as love. But it was too late for that. She was already in love with Mason Reed and his daughter, and there was no going back from that. All she could do was hold on and hope that this time the story ended differently. The realization that she was in love hit Victoria at the most inconvenient possible moment, specifically while she was elbow-deep in dishwater at Mason's house on a random Tuesday in May. Chloe was at the kitchen table doing homework and complaining about long division. Mason was on the floor fixing the cabinet door that had been hanging crooked for 6 months. And Victoria was washing dishes because Mason's dishwasher had finally given up the ghost entirely, joining the explorer in appliance heaven. "This is stupid," Chloe announced. "Why do I need to know how to divide big numbers? That's what calculators are for." "Calculators don't teach you how to think," Victoria said, rinsing a plate. "Neither does long division." "Can't argue with that logic," Mason called from under the sink. "You're supposed to be on my side," Victoria said. "I'm on the side of truth." Victoria threw a dish towel at him. It landed on his chest. Mason emerged from the cabinet grinning, his hair sticking up at odd angles and a smudge of grease on his cheek, and something in Victoria's chest just cracked wide open. This was love. Not the careful, rational decision she'd always imagined it would be. Not the strategic partnership she'd thought she wanted. Just this, standing in a cramped kitchen with broken appliances and homework complaints and a man who made her feel like coming home. She was completely screwed. "You okay?" Mason asked, his smile fading into concern. "Yeah, fine, just thinking. Dangerous activity. Tell me about it." That night, after Chloe was asleep and Victoria had gone back to her own house, she sat on her couch and tried to logic her way out of what she was feeling. Make a list. Pros and cons. All the reasons this was a terrible idea. Mason was barely making ends meet financially. She had money, which created an inherent power imbalance. He had a kid, which meant Victoria could never be his first priority. He was still grieving his wife. She had trust issues that probably required years of therapy. They'd known each other less than 6 months. This was too fast, too intense, too risky. The cons list was extensive and rational and completely useless because none of it changed how she felt. Her phone buzzed. Mason, you left your jacket. Want me to bring it over? Victoria looked at the jacket draped over her dining room chair. She'd deliberately left it there as an excuse to see him tomorrow. Victoria, keep it for now. I'll grab it next time. Mason, you sure? Shh, it's supposed to rain tomorrow. Victoria, I have other jackets. Mason, okay. Hey, random question. Victoria, yeah? Mason, are we dating? Victoria stared at her phone. Her heart was doing something complicated and arrhythmic in her chest. Victoria, do you want to be dating? Mason, I asked you first. Victoria, mature. Mason, I'm serious. I don't know what we're doing here. Victoria, neither do I. Mason, that's helpful. Victoria, I know. The three dots appeared and disappeared several times. Victoria waited, barely breathing. Mason, can I come over? Victoria, now? It's almost 11. Mason, is that a no? Victoria looked at her empty living room, her perfect minimalist furniture, the life she'd built that had felt so safe and was now just lonely. Victoria, it's a yes. She heard his front door close 5 minutes later, watched through her window as he crossed the lawn, hands shoved in his pockets, looking nervous. Victoria opened the door before he could knock. Hi, Mason said. Hi. They stood there looking at each other, and Victoria was abruptly aware of how much had changed since that first night when he'd shown up with her purse. How he'd gone from stranger to neighbor to friend to something that didn't have a neat category. Come in, she said. Mason followed her inside, but neither of them sat down. They just stood in her living room, the space between them charged with everything they hadn't said. I can't stop thinking about you, Mason said finally. I know we haven't defined this or whatever, but I need you to know that. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing before I fall asleep, and I don't know what to do with that. Victoria's throat was tight. I think about you too. Yeah? All the time. It's actually kind of annoying. Mason smiled. Sorry? Don't apologize. Just tell me what you want, Mason, because I can't keep guessing. I want you. The words came out raw and honest. I want this. Whatever this is. I want to stop pretending we're just friends when we both know it's more than that. What about Chloe? What about her? She's already attached to me. If we do this and it doesn't work out, then we'll figure it out. Together. Mason stepped closer. I'm not saying it won't be complicated. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I'm tired of being scared of what might go wrong. I want to focus on what might go right. Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was too fast, too risky, but she was tired too, tired of protecting herself, tired of being alone. Okay, she said. Okay? Okay, let's do this. Let's be together and see what happens. Mason's smile was bright enough to light the whole room. Yeah? Yeah, but I have conditions. Of course you do. We take it slow with Chloe. I don't want to confuse her or make her think, agreed. What else? You have to actually tell me when something's wrong instead of just dealing with it yourself. That goes both ways. Fair. And, Victoria hesitated. You have to be patient with me. I'm not good at this. At trusting people. At believing this won't fall apart. Mason reached out and took her hand. I'm not good at this either. We'll figure it out together. That's very optimistic. I'm trying out this new thing where I don't assume the worst. How's that working for you? Ask me in 6 months. Victoria laughed, and then Mason was pulling her closer, and then they were kissing, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like something they'd been building towards since that first night in the blizzard. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria rested her forehead against his. So we're doing this, she said. We're doing this. I'm terrified. Me too. Good. At least we're equally terrified. Mason smiled and kissed her again, softer this time. Want to watch a terrible movie and pretend we're normal people on a normal date? We're watching a movie at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. That's not a normal date. Fine. Want to watch a terrible movie and acknowledge that we're weird people on a weird date? Much better, yes. They ended up on her couch watching some action movie that neither of them paid attention to. Victoria tucked against Mason's side, his arm around her shoulders, both of them just existing in the same space without the weight of all the things they'd been avoiding. It felt right. Terrifyingly, wonderfully right. Mason left around 1 a.m. because he had an early shift and Chloe would be up at 6. They kissed goodbye at the door like teenagers, and Victoria felt like she was glowing from the inside out. She went to bed and actually slept through the night for the first time in months. Telling Chloe turned out to be less complicated than Victoria expected, mostly because Chloe had apparently figured it out weeks ago. "I know," she said when Mason sat her down for the talk. "You guys are together now." Mason blinked. "How do you know that?" "You smile different when you look at her, and she touches your arm a lot." "She... what?" "Like this." Chloe demonstrated an arm touch. "All the time, I noticed." Victoria, who was sitting across from them, looking mortified, said, "I touch your arm?" "Constantly," Chloe confirmed. "It's cute." "Oh my... So are you okay with this?" Mason interrupted. "With me and Victoria being together?" Chloe rolled her eyes with the exasperation only a 7-year-old could manage. "Daddy, I've been waiting for you guys to figure it out forever. It's been 4 months. That's forever." Mason looked at Victoria, who was trying not to laugh. "Apparently we've been moving at a glacial pace." "Glaciers are slow," Chloe said helpfully. "We learned about them in science." "Thanks, Bug. Very informative." "So Miss Victoria's your girlfriend now?" The word felt too small for what Victoria actually was, but Mason nodded. "Yeah. Is that okay?" Chloe launched herself at both of them, wrapping her arms around their necks. "It's perfect. Can she come to my birthday party?" "Your birthday isn't for 5 months." "I'm planning ahead." Victoria laughed and hugged Chloe back, and Mason felt something in his chest expand. This was his family now. Not the one he'd planned for, not the one he'd lost, but something new, something unexpected, something worth fighting for. The next few months were a study in learning how to be together while maintaining the lives they'd built separately. Mason still worked his doubles at the warehouse. Victoria started consulting part-time for a few nonprofits, using her business expertise for something that felt more meaningful than corporate profits. Chloe finished 2nd grade with decent grades and a newfound obsession with astronomy. They had dinner together most nights, sometimes at Mason's place, sometimes at Victoria's. They went to Chloe's school events together. The spring concert, where Chloe forgot half her lines. The field day where Mason pulled a muscle trying to keep up with the relay race. Victoria learned how to make spaghetti without setting off the smoke alarm. Mason taught her how to check her oil and change a tire. Small things. Normal things. The kind of domestic routine that Victoria had spent her entire adult life avoiding and now couldn't imagine living without. But it wasn't perfect. They fought sometimes. About stupid things, mostly. Whose turn it was to do dishes, whether Chloe should be allowed to have a later bedtime, how much time they should spend together versus apart. About bigger things, too. Money was a constant tension. Victoria had plenty. Mason had barely enough. She wanted to help more than he wanted to accept help, and that created friction that neither of them knew how to navigate. "Just let me buy you a car," Victoria said one night in July after Mason's borrowed vehicle from a coworker broke down for the 3rd time. "No." "Why not? I have the money. You need a car. This is simple math. It's not about math." "Then what's it about?" Mason set down his coffee mug harder than necessary. "It's about me not being a charity case." "I never said you were. You didn't have to. Every time you offer to pay for something, or fix something, or buy something, it's a reminder that you have money and I don't." Victoria flinched. "That's not what I'm trying to do." "I know, but that's how it feels." They stared at each other across her kitchen table, both frustrated, both trying to figure out how to bridge a gap that felt wider than it actually was. "I'm not trying to make you feel bad," Victoria said quietly. I want to help. I care about you, and watching you struggle when I could make it easier, that's hard for me. And accepting help when I've spent 4 years doing everything myself, that's hard for me. So what do we do?" Mason was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, but we'll figure it out." "You keep saying that, because it's true. We're going to fight about stupid stuff and disagree about money and probably drive each other crazy sometimes. But we'll figure it out because the alternative is walking away, and I'm not doing that." Victoria felt her eyes sting. You promise? I promise. They were learning, slowly, messily, imperfectly. Learning how to be together without losing themselves. Learning how to fight without destroying each other. Learning that love wasn't the easy, automatic thing movies made it seem. It was work and compromise and choosing each other even when it was hard. By September, when the leaves started turning and Chloe started third grade, something had shifted. They'd survived their first real fight and come out stronger. They'd celebrated Chloe's 8th birthday with a pizza party and a telescope that Victoria definitely overspent on, but Chloe loved. They'd settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. And Mason started thinking about the future in concrete terms instead of abstract maybes. He'd been carrying the ring box in his pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Lauren had helped him pick it out. Simple, elegant, nothing too flashy because Victoria would hate that. The ring had cost more than Mason wanted to think about, but he'd been saving for months, setting aside money from every paycheck even when it meant eating ramen for dinner. The right moment, he'd decided, was a Saturday afternoon in October when the weather was perfect and the park near their houses was covered in fallen leaves. Chloe was in on the plan. She'd helped him practice what to say, critiquing his word choice with the brutal honesty only an 8-year-old could provide. "You can't say you make me happy," she'd said. "That's boring." "What should I say? Say something about how she makes your heart feel big, or how she's the best thing that happened to us. Something true." Something true. Mason could do that. He'd asked Victoria to meet him at the park, said he wanted to take a walk and talk about something important. She'd agreed, probably assuming it was something about Chloe, or the future, or one of their ongoing discussions about how to blend their lives more fully. She didn't know Chloe was hiding behind a tree with Lauren, ready to jump out after the big moment. She didn't know Mason had spent the last week mentally rehearsing what he wanted to say. She didn't know that the small box in his jacket pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Victoria showed up wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, no makeup, just herself. Mason's heart did that thing it always did when he saw her. That skip-beat recognition that this person was his, somehow, against all odds. "Hey," she said, smiling. "You look nervous." "I'm not nervous." "You're sweating." "It's warm out." "It's 50 degrees, Mason laughed despite himself. "Okay, I'm a little nervous." "Why? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Can we walk?" They started down the path that wound through the park, leaves crunching under their feet. The autumn sun filtered through the trees, making everything gold and red and impossibly beautiful. "So what did you want to talk about?" Victoria asked. Mason's prepared speech evaporated from his brain. "I'm bad at this." "Bad at what?" "Talking, feelings, all of it." Victoria smiled. "You're actually pretty good at feelings when you stop overthinking. That's the problem. I can't stop overthinking." "Then just say what you're thinking." Mason stopped walking, turned to face her, took both her hands in his because he needed something to hold on to. "Almost a year ago, you opened your door during a blizzard and let me inside," he said. "And I don't just mean your house. You let me into your life when you had every reason to keep the door closed. You let Chloe into your heart when you could have stayed at a safe distance. You showed up for us in ways I didn't know I needed." Victoria's eyes were getting bright. "Mason, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I spent 4 years just surviving, getting through each day without thinking about tomorrow or next week or next year. I couldn't imagine a future because the one I'd planned was gone. And then you happened, you and your terrible pancakes and your empty house that you turned into a home. You happened, and suddenly I could see a future again. Not the one I lost, but something different, something better." "Mason, what are you—" He let go of one of her hands and pulled the ring box from his pocket. Victoria's breath caught. "I'm not good with words," Mason said, "and I definitely can't promise you easy or simple or perfect. What I can promise is that I will show up, every day, in the big moments and the small ones, when it's hard and when it's not. I will choose you and choose us and keep choosing for as long as you'll let me." He opened the box. The ring caught the afternoon light. "Victoria Hayes, will you marry me?" Victoria was crying now, tears streaming down her face, and for a terrible moment Mason thought she was going to say no, that he'd misread everything, that he'd moved too fast or pushed too hard or— "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course yes." Relief and joy hit Mason so hard he actually laughed. "Yeah?" "Yeah, you idiot. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then Victoria was kissing him, and he was kissing her back, and somewhere behind them Chloe was cheering, and Lauren was probably crying because she always cried at this stuff. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria was smiling so wide it looked like it hurt. "That was a pretty good speech for someone who's bad with words," she said. "I had help. Chloe edited it." "Of course she did. She's very invested in our relationship." "I know. She keeps asking when you're going to propose." "She knew I was going to propose?" "Mason, everyone knew you were going to propose. You've been acting weird for weeks." "I was trying to be subtle." "You were failing spectacularly." He kissed her again because he could, because she'd said yes, because this woman who'd been so scared of letting anyone close had just agreed to spend her life with him. Chloe came running up then, Lauren trailing behind, trying to look casual and completely failing. "Did she say yes?" Chloe demanded. "She said yes," Mason confirmed. Chloe threw her arms around both of them. "I'm so happy. Can I be in the wedding? Can I wear a fancy dress? Can we have cake?" "Yes to all of that," Victoria said, laughing through her tears. "Can I call you Mom now?" The question stopped everyone. Victoria looked at Mason, who looked at Chloe, who was watching them both with hopeful eyes. "You don't have to," Victoria said carefully. "I know you had a mom. I'm not trying to replace her." "I know, but I want to. If that's okay." Victoria knelt down to Chloe's level. "That's more than okay. That's—" Her voice broke. "That's the best thing anyone's ever asked me." Chloe hugged her tight, and Mason watched his daughter and his fiancée hold each other and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace, wholeness, home. Lauren came up beside him, crying predictably. "You did good, big brother." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Emma would be happy for you." Mason looked at his sister. "You think so?" "I know so. She loved you. She'd want you to be happy, to move forward, to find this." Mason thought about Emma, about the life they'd planned and lost, about the grief he'd carried for so long it had become part of him. And he realized that loving Victoria didn't mean forgetting Emma. It meant honoring the part of himself that Emma had loved, the part that believed in second chances and new beginnings. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think you're right." They walked back through the park together, all four of them, Chloe chattering about wedding plans and Lauren offering unsolicited advice about venues. Victoria walked next to Mason, their fingers intertwined, the ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. "I can't believe you said yes," Mason said. "I can't believe it took you this long to ask. I wanted to make sure." "Make sure of what?" "That I wasn't just lonely, that this was real, and not just me trying to fill a void Emma left." Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. And you're not filling a void. You're creating something entirely new, something I didn't know I could have again." She kissed him softly. "Good answer. I'm getting better at this feelings thing." "You really are." They started walking again, and Mason looked at the three people around him, his daughter, his sister, his fiancée, and thought about how life had a weird way of working out. Not the way you planned, not the way you expected. But sometimes, if you were lucky and brave enough to keep your heart open when it would be easier to close it, life gave you something better than what you'd lost. It gave you a second chance. And this time, Mason wasn't going to waste it. Planning a wedding, Victoria discovered, was exponentially more complicated than running a tech company. At least in business, people made decisions based on logic and data. Wedding planning seemed to operate on an entirely different system involving emotions, traditions, and opinions from people who had absolutely no stake in the outcome. "Your Aunt Carol thinks we should have the ceremony at noon," Mason said, reading from a text message while sitting at Victoria's kitchen table. "Because apparently evening weddings are too Hollywood." "I didn't know I had an Aunt Carol." "You don't. She's my aunt, but she's very invested in our wedding timeline." Victoria looked up from her laptop where she'd been comparing venues. "Do you even like your Aunt Carol?" "Not particularly. She once told me I was raising Chloe wrong because I let her wear sneakers to church." "We're not having a noon wedding to please your Aunt Carol." "Thank you. That's what I said." "What did she say?" "That I'd regret not listening to her wisdom," Victoria snorted. "Her wisdom about wedding times?" She's apparently an expert on all things wedding-related despite being divorced 3 times. That's impressive, actually. Terrible, but impressive. They'd been engaged for 2 months, and Victoria had learned several things. First, that everyone had opinions about their wedding. Second, that she didn't care about most wedding traditions, and Mason cared about even fewer. Third, that the only thing they both agreed on was wanting something small, personal, and not resembling a corporate event. The problem was defining small and personal when Lauren kept adding people to the guest list. "We're at 75 people now," Victoria said, refreshing the spreadsheet she'd created because, of course, she'd created a spreadsheet. "How? We started at 40. Your sister added her entire book club, and Marcus's paramedic team, and someone named Dennis, who I don't think either of us know." Mason leaned over to look at the screen. "Dennis is Marcus's cousin. Why is Marcus's cousin invited to our wedding?" "Because apparently he gave you guys a jump start once, and Lauren feels obligated." "That was 3 years ago." "I know. I'm not defending the logic. I'm just reporting it." Mason dropped his head onto the table. "Can we elope?" "Don't tempt me. I've been seriously considering it. Vegas, quick ceremony, back by Tuesday. Chloe would murder us both." "Fair point. She's been planning her dress for weeks." Victoria smiled. Chloe had taken her role as flower girl with the seriousness of a military operation. She'd drawn 17 different dress designs, created a color-coded system for flower petal distribution, and had opinions about everything from napkin colors to whether they should serve chicken or fish. "She asked me yesterday if we could have a chocolate fountain," Victoria said. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd think about it." "Victoria, no." "Why not? It would make her happy." "It would also make a mess and probably result in at least 3 kids getting sick." "You're very practical about chocolate fountains." "I'm practical about anything that could result in me cleaning vomit off dress shoes." Victoria laughed, and Mason lifted his head to smile at her. These moments were becoming her favorite, the casual, everyday negotiations of building a life together. The spreadsheets and family politics and debates about chocolate fountains, all the ordinary chaos that added up to something extraordinary. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Victoria almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Hello? Is this Victoria Hayes?" A woman's voice, professional, slightly hesitant. "Yes." "Who's this?" "My name is Rebecca Chen. I'm calling from Bright Horizons Animal Rescue. You inquired about volunteer opportunities about 6 months ago." Victoria's brain took a moment to catch up. 6 months ago. That would have been March, right after she'd told Mason about wanting to be a veterinarian as a kid. "I did, yes. I'm sorry. I didn't expect to hear back." "We had a long wait list, but we've had an opening come up, and I wanted to see if you were still interested. We especially need help with our cat socialization program. The pay is minimal, but—" "I don't need pay," Victoria interrupted. "I'm interested, very interested. When would I start?" Mason was watching her with curiosity. Victoria found herself smiling without meaning to. "Could you come in next Tuesday for an orientation?" "Yes, absolutely. Thank you." She hung up and looked at Mason, who was still watching her. "What was that about?" he asked. "I think I just got a job." "Doing what?" "Working with cats at an animal rescue." Mason's expression shifted to something warm and pleased. "Really?" "Really. I applied months ago and forgot about it. And now—" She stopped, started over. "Is this crazy? I don't know anything about cats." "You don't have to know everything to start. You just have to show up and learn." Victoria thought about the last time she'd started something without knowing exactly how it would turn out. That had been opening her door to a stranger during a blizzard. That had worked out pretty well. "Okay," she said. "I'm doing this." "Good. You'll be great at it." "How do you know?" "Because you're good at everything once you stop worrying about being perfect." That observation was uncomfortably accurate. Victoria made a face at him, and Mason grinned. "Speaking of starting new things," he said, "I have something to tell you too." "Yeah?" "I applied for a supervisor position at work. Interviews next week." Victoria set down her laptop. "Mason, that's amazing. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't think I'd get the interview. It's a long shot. But they called yesterday and—" He shrugged. "Figured it was worth trying." "It's absolutely worth trying. You'll be great. It's more money, better hours." Actual weekends sometimes. So you could spend more time with us. That's the idea. Victoria got up and walked around the table to kiss him. I'm proud of you. Don't be proud yet. I haven't gotten it. I'm proud that you applied, that you're letting yourself want something. Mason pulled her into his lap. You're a bad influence. I used to be much more resigned to my fate. Your fate was working doubles forever? Pretty much. That's a terrible fate. I'm aware. That's why I'm trying to change it. They sat there in her kitchen, tangled together, both of them tentatively reaching for futures they'd convinced themselves were impossible. It felt terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. Chloe appeared in the doorway, having let herself in with the key Victoria had given her last month. Are you guys being gross again? She asked. Extremely gross, Mason confirmed. Can you stop? I need help with my science project. What's the project? The water cycle. I have to build a model. Victoria reluctantly extracted herself from Mason's lap. What kind of model? I don't know. That's why I need help. An hour later, Victoria's kitchen table was covered in plastic containers, food coloring, and construction paper. Chloe's interpretation of the water cycle involved glitter, a lot of glitter, and a color scheme that was more rainbow than scientifically accurate. I don't think precipitation is sparkly purple, Mason said. It should be, Chloe argued. It's prettier. Science isn't about pretty. Why not? Science can be pretty if it wants to. Victoria caught Mason's eye and smiled. This was their life now. Science projects and wedding planning and job interviews. The beautiful, messy, ordinary chaos of being a family. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. Lauren, Sunday dinner this week, 6 p.m. Don't be late. We're discussing bachelor/bachelorette parties. Victoria showed Mason the text. He groaned. Do we have to have those? He asked. Lauren will kill us if we don't. Can we just have one party? Together? That defeats the purpose. The purpose is to get drunk and make questionable decisions. We can do that together. I don't think that's the purpose. Then what is? Victoria thought about it. I actually have no idea. Mason's interview the following week went better than he expected, which meant he spent the next 2 weeks in a state of anxious waiting while the company made their decision. Victoria started at the animal rescue and came home covered in cat hair and happier than Mason had seen her in months. Chloe's science project got a B+, which she insisted was because her teacher didn't appreciate artistic vision. Life continued in its chaotic, imperfect way. And then on a Tuesday in early November, Mason got the call. He'd gotten the job. Victoria found out when she got home from the rescue to find Mason and Chloe dancing around his kitchen to music blasting from his phone. Mason swept Victoria into the celebration, spinning her around while Chloe cheered. I got it, he said, breathless and grinning. I actually got it. I knew you would. Liar. You were worried. Okay, yes. I was worried. But I'm not surprised. You earned this. Mason kissed her, and Chloe made exaggerated gagging sounds. You guys are so embarrassing, she said. Wait until the wedding, Mason told her. It's going to be much worse. I know. That's why I'm practicing being embarrassed now. They ordered pizza to celebrate. Lauren and Marcus came over, and somehow the small celebration turned into an impromptu party that lasted until nearly 11. Mason's tiny house was packed with people and noise and laughter, and Victoria stood in the middle of it thinking about how different this was from any celebration she'd had during her years running the company. Those had been professional, polished, the kind of events where everyone dressed up and said the right things and went home early because they had work the next day. This was real, messy. Marcus told terrible jokes. Lauren cried happy tears. Chloe fell asleep on the couch halfway through, and no one bothered to move her because she looked peaceful there. And Victoria realized that this, right here, in this cramped house, with these people who'd somehow become her family, this was what success actually looked like. Not the money or the business accolades or the fancy house. Just this. Connection. Love. Belonging. December arrived with the kind of cold that made even lifelong Chicagoans complain. The wedding was set for early January, which everyone agreed was insane from a weather perspective, but felt right to Mason and Victoria. It's almost the anniversary of when we met, Victoria had said when they were picking dates. You want to get married during blizzard season? I want to get married when it means something. So January it was. They'd booked a small venue, a historic building in Lincoln Park with good heating and enough room for the 75 people who somehow kept multiplying. Victoria's dress was simple and elegant, ordered from a boutique after exactly one fitting because she hated shopping. Mason's suit was off the rack but fit well enough. Chloe's flower girl dress was the third design she'd drawn, pale blue with ribbons that she'd picked out herself. The rehearsal dinner was 2 days before Christmas, which was terrible planning but the only time everyone could gather. It was held at a restaurant in Wicker Park, private room in the back, family and close friends only. Victoria's hands were shaking when they arrived. "You okay?" Mason asked, taking her coat. "I'm fine, just there are a lot of people." "You've presented to boardrooms with hundreds of people. That was different. Those people weren't evaluating whether I was good enough for you." Mason stopped and turned to face her. "Nobody here is thinking that. Your Aunt Carol definitely is. My Aunt Carol thinks everyone is beneath her, and also she's not coming to the rehearsal dinner because we didn't invite her." "We didn't?" "We did not." Very deliberately. Victoria smiled despite her nerves. "Good call." Lauren found them immediately, pulling Victoria into a hug that was probably meant to be comforting, but was mostly just tight. "You look beautiful," Lauren said. "I look terrified." "That too, but mostly beautiful." Lauren lowered her voice. "Thank you. For making him happy again. For being exactly what he needed. I think it's mutual." "I know it is. That's what makes it perfect." The dinner was loud and chaotic in the best way. Toasts were made, some heartfelt, some embarrassing. Marcus told the story of the blizzard from his perspective, which involved a lot of exaggeration about snowdrift heights and Mason's heroism in braving the storm. "It was like 8 inches of snow," Mason protested. "It was 14 inches, Marcus corrected. "I checked the weather records." "Still not exactly Antarctic expedition level." "Let me tell the story my way." Chloe gave a toast that she'd written herself, reading carefully from a piece of notebook paper. "My dad is the best dad in the world," she read, "even when he makes me eat vegetables. And Victoria is the best almost mom. She helps with homework and doesn't make me clean my room too much. I'm happy they found each other." The end. Everyone applauded. Victoria wiped her eyes, and Mason pulled Chloe into a hug that lifted her off the ground. Later, after dinner, when people were mingling and the noise level had reached a comfortable chaos, Mason found Victoria standing by the window looking out at the street. "Hey," he said. "You okay?" "I'm perfect. Just taking it in." "Taking what in?" Victoria gestured at the room behind them. "All of this. A year ago I was eating takeout alone in my empty house, wondering what the point of everything was. And now I'm here, about to marry you, surrounded by people who actually care whether I'm happy. A lot can change in a year." Everything changed in a year. Mason wrapped his arms around her from behind, and Victoria leaned back against him. "You changed my life," she said quietly. "I need you to know that. I was so lonely and didn't even realize it. I was just existing. And then you knocked on my door and everything got better. Pretty sure you invited me in. I just returned a purse. You know what I mean." "I do." Mason kissed her temple. "You changed my life too. Made me remember what it felt like to want something beyond just surviving tomorrow." They stood there watching the street, the city lights reflecting off the snow that had started falling. Big, fat flakes that drifted down lazily, covering everything in white. "It's snowing," Victoria said. "Good omen for the wedding. Or a sign we picked the worst possible month. Probably both." Victoria turned in his arms to face him. "I love you. I don't think I say that enough. You say it all the time. Not out loud. The out loud part is overrated anyway." She kissed him, soft and sweet, and Mason thought about how he'd been so convinced he'd used up his chance at happiness. That Emma had been it, his one shot at love, and losing her meant spending the rest of his life alone. He'd been so wrong. Love wasn't a limited resource. It didn't run out just because you'd lost someone. It grew and changed and appeared when you least expected it, often in the form of a woman who couldn't cook and lived next door and somehow saw past all his broken parts to the person underneath. The wedding day arrived with clear skies and temperatures hovering just above freezing. The venue was decorated simply, candles, white flowers, soft lighting that made everything look warm despite the winter cold outside. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, an aisle down the middle, everything ready. Mason stood at the front with Marcus beside him, his best man, watching guests file in. His hands were sweating despite the temperature. He'd been married before, had stood at the front of a church waiting for Emma. But this felt different. Not better or worse, just different, like starting a new chapter instead of trying to rewrite the old one. Lauren appeared at his elbow. "You good?" Terrified. "That's normal." "Is it?" "Absolutely. I threw up before my wedding." "That's not comforting." "It wasn't meant to be comforting. It was meant to be honest." Mason looked at his sister. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Are you seriously asking me that now, 20 minutes before the ceremony?" "Yes." Lauren grabbed his face with both hands. "Listen to me. Victoria's perfect for you. She's smart and kind, and she loves Chloe like her own. She makes you laugh and challenges you and doesn't let you wallow in your own stuff. You're absolutely doing the right thing." "Okay. Okay? Okay." Lauren kissed his forehead and went to find her seat. Music started playing. The doors at the back of the venue opened. Chloe came down the aisle first, taking her flower girl duties very seriously. She dropped petals with the precision of someone executing a well-planned military operation. When she reached the front, she gave Mason a thumbs up. And then Victoria appeared. She was walking alone, no father to give her away because her parents were gone, and she'd insisted she didn't need anyone's permission to choose her own life. The dress was simple and elegant, fitted at the top and flowing at the bottom. Her hair was down, styled but still her. No veil, just herself. She was the most beautiful thing Mason had ever seen. Victoria walked down the aisle, meeting his eyes the whole way, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. When she reached him, Mason took her hands and realized his were still shaking. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi. You okay?" "Perfect." The officiant started talking, but Mason barely heard the words. He was too focused on Victoria's face, the way she was looking at him like he was the only person in the room. They'd written their own vows, and when it was his turn to speak, Mason pulled out the note card he'd prepared and then immediately put it back in his pocket. "I had a whole speech written," he said, "but I'm going to be honest instead. Victoria, a year ago, I was convinced I knew exactly what my life would look like. Work, raise Chloe, survive. That was it. No room for anything else because anything else felt too risky. And then you showed up and completely destroyed those plans." Victoria smiled, her eyes already bright with tears. "You made me want things again," Mason continued. "Not just survive, but actually live. You made me believe in second chances and new beginnings, and that it's okay to be happy even when you've lost everything. You're my best friend and my partner and the person I want next to me for every moment that comes next. I love you. I'm going to love you tomorrow and next week and 50 years from now. That's my vow. Just loving you consistently, even when you burn breakfast." "Especially when I burn breakfast," Victoria corrected, laughing through tears. "Especially then." Victoria took a shaky breath and started her own vows. "I don't have a note card because I knew I'd cry and ruin it," she said. "So I'm winging this. Mason, before I met you, I thought success meant achieving goals and making money and proving I was worth something. I built a company and sold it and made more money than I knew what to do with, and all I felt was empty. And then you knocked on my door during a blizzard, and suddenly nothing else mattered except this, us, being part of something real." She squeezed his hands tighter. "You taught me that it's okay to be imperfect, to burn pancakes and ask for help and admit when I'm scared. You showed me what love actually looks like, not the fairy tale version, but the real thing, with fights and compromises and choosing each other even when it's hard. I love you. I love Chloe. I love the life we're building together, and I promise to show up for all of it, the messy parts, the beautiful parts, everything in between. That's my vow." Mason was definitely crying now. So was half the room. The officiant said something about rings, and they exchanged the simple bands they'd picked out together. And then the words everyone was waiting for. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you married. You may kiss." Mason pulled Victoria close and kissed her while everyone applauded, and Chloe cheered louder than anyone. When they finally pulled apart, they were both grinning like idiots. "We did it," Victoria whispered. "We did it." They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, husband and wife. Outside the venue, snow had started falling again, big, gentle flakes that caught in Victoria's hair and made everything look like a scene from a movie. The reception was exactly what they'd wanted. Good food, better company, dancing that lasted until everyone's feet hurt. Chloe gave an impromptu speech about how she now had two parents again and started crying halfway through, which made Victoria cry, which made Mason cry. Lauren cornered them during a slow song. "I'm so happy for you both," she said. "Truly." "Thank you," Victoria said, "for everything, for making me feel welcome, for giving me a chance." "You didn't need a chance. You just needed to show up." Lauren hugged her tight. "Welcome to the family, officially." Mason danced with Chloe to a song she'd picked herself, some pop song that was too fast for a slow dance, but they made it work. Victoria watched them from the edge of the dance floor, her heart so full it actually hurt. Marcus appeared beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "They're good together," he said. "They really are. You're good for both of them, you know. He's different now, lighter, more himself. He's good for me too." "I know. That's what makes this work." Marcus clinked his glass against hers. "To new beginnings. To new beginnings." The night wound down slowly. Guests left with well wishes and promises to visit soon. Chloe fell asleep in a chair, exhausted from dancing and excitement. Mason carried her to Lauren's car. She'd be staying with her aunt tonight while Mason and Victoria had their wedding night to themselves. Finally, it was just the 2 of them standing in the empty venue surrounded by candles that were burning down and flower arrangements that would be gone by morning. "We're married," Victoria said. "We are. How do you feel?" Mason pulled her close. "Like I just made the best decision of my life." "Second best." "What was the first?" "Returning my purse in a blizzard." Mason laughed. "That was a pretty good decision." "The best." They drove home together through streets covered in fresh snow. The city was quiet, peaceful, like it was giving them space for this moment. When they pulled onto their street, both their houses were dark and waiting. "Your place or mine?" Mason asked. "Ours," Victoria corrected. "We should probably start calling it ours." "You're right, our place." They decided to live in Victoria's townhouse. It was bigger, in better condition, and had space for all of them without anyone having to give up too much. Mason's house would be rented out, providing extra income and a safety net if they ever needed it. Inside, Victoria kicked off her heels and Mason loosened his tie, and they collapsed on the couch together. "That was exhausting," Victoria said. "Best exhausting day ever." "Agreed." They sat in comfortable silence, Victoria's head on Mason's shoulder, both of them too tired to move but too happy to care. "Thank you," Victoria said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me, when I was scared and trying to push you away. For being patient. Thank you for letting me in, for taking a chance on a warehouse worker with a kid and a broken-down car. Best chance I ever took." Mason kissed the top of her head. "What do you think happens next?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, we've done the falling in love part, the getting engaged, the wedding. What comes after?" Victoria thought about it. "Life. Regular, boring, beautiful life. We wake up tomorrow and make breakfast, probably badly. We take Chloe to school, you go to work, I go to the rescue. We come home and have dinner and argue about dishes, and then we do it again the next day and the day after that. That sounds perfect. It sounds ordinary." "Exactly." They sat there a while longer, neither wanting to break the spell of the day. Eventually, they went upstairs to bed, still in their wedding clothes because they were too tired to change. Victoria fell asleep with Mason's arms around her, feeling safer and more settled than she'd ever felt in her life. The next morning, she woke to find him already up, sounds coming from the kitchen. Victoria pulled on a robe and went downstairs to find Mason attempting to make pancakes. "You're making breakfast," she said. "Trying to, the batter's lumpy." "That's fine. Lumpy is good." "Lumpy is definitely not good." Victoria wrapped her arms around him from behind. "Let me help." Together they made breakfast, getting flour everywhere and burning the first batch, and laughing when the smoke detector went off. It was imperfect and messy and exactly right. They ate at the kitchen table as snow continued to fall outside, the same snow that had brought them together a year ago. Mason reached across and took Victoria's hand. "Happy first day of marriage," he said. Happy first day. Any regrets? None. You? Not a single one. And it was true. Mason had no regrets about the blizzard that had led him to Victoria's door. No regrets about opening his heart again when it would have been safer to keep it closed. No regrets about choosing hope over fear. Because sometimes the best things in life came from the moments you didn't plan for. The detours and accidents and chance encounters that changed everything. Sometimes you lost the life you thought you'd have and found something completely different. Sometimes you just had to be brave enough to knock on a stranger's door during a storm. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that stranger became your home. Years later, long after that first winter together, Mason and Victoria would tell their story to anyone who asked. How they met during Chicago's worst blizzard in decades. How a lost purse led to coffee, led to pancakes, led to everything. Chloe would roll her eyes every time, claiming she'd heard it 1,000,000 times. But she'd smile too, because she remembered being 7 years old and wishing for a family, and somehow getting exactly that. And every January, when the first snow fell and covered the city in white, Victoria would look at Mason with that smile he'd fallen in love with and say the same thing. Good thing I dropped that purse. And Mason would pull her close and kiss her, and agree that yes, it was very good indeed. Because life had taught them both that the best stories don't always go according to plan. That second chances were real, and love didn't have an expiration date. That being broken didn't mean you couldn't be whole again. It just meant you had to be willing to let someone help you pick up the pieces. And if you were very brave and very lucky, those pieces might come together into something even better than what came before. Not perfect, never perfect, but real. And true. And theirs. And in the end, that was all that mattered.